Hi.
Hello. Sorry, drinking. Hello.
That's okay. Happy 50th episode.
Happy 50th episode. That's much nicer than happy 50th birthday.
I can't believe it.
It's crazy.
Well, your 50th birthday happened a long time ago.
Okay, bitch, settle down.
It's our 50th birthday of our first episode.
Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I know, and just a quick shout out to all of our listeners and our followers and our subscribers and our Patreon members.
And if they're not on Patreon, they're missing stuff. Seriously.
I know you're missing our bonus stuff. And to all of our authors who we've had wonderful conversations with so far, but also a huge special shout out to the publicists who work on these books. They are the tireless people who work behind the scenes and have just been rooting for us and have been on our side this whole time. And we just couldn't do it without these incredible publicists. And so we're super, super grateful to all of you.
And appreciative. Thank you.
Some of whom are listeners. And it means so much when folks like authors and publicists start listening to the podcast. It's just like so cool. So happy 50th. Here's to 50 more.
Yes. At this rate, we're on a track, man. We're on a track.
I know. And our special 50th episode, we've got Rachel Khong talking about her new book, Real Americans. All 4 of our single author episodes this month have been book club picks of some kind, which is
picking
bonkers.
well. We are picking well.
As always, all the books that we talk about on this episode, you could find in our bookshop.org page, which supports independent bookstores and supports gays reading. And it was just Indie Bookstore Day. So all the more reason to go support and buy some books. If you are not following us on Instagram, follow us at Gays Reading, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for constantly joining us.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Rachel Khong is the author of Goodbye Vitamin, winner of the California Book Award for First Fiction, and named a Best Book of the Year by NPR, the Oprah Magazine, Vogue, and Esquire. Her work has appeared in the New York Times Book Review, The Cut, The Guardian, The Paris Review, and Tin House. In 2018, she founded The Ruby, a work and event space for women and non-binary writers and artists in San Francisco's Mission District. She lives in California.
Fantastic.
I'm Jason.
I'm Brit.
And enjoy this 50th episode of Gays Reading. Hi.
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I'm using this microphone that it feels like it picks up everything. Like I can hear the birds outside.
We can't hear anything. I know you're good. You're so good. Did you get a new mic because you were embarking for the book launch?
No, I was sent this mic because I am occasionally a guest on a podcast called Recipe Club.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a book club for recipes. And so they had sent me this, but usually it's somebody else doing the sound engineering or whatever. Yeah. No, I'm just like, okay, this is fine.
Since you talked about food first, I have things I need to talk to you about.
Sure.
Okay. Eggs. My new favorite thing. This is so sacrilegious, but this is a safe space and we're recording, so this may or may not make it in the episode. My new favorite thing is microwave eggs.
I support that. Yeah. Like, how do you do it? How do you do it?
I'll just do egg whites because, hey, hashtag cholesterol. And I'll do them in a mug, maybe 2 or 3 egg whites in a mug, and cover it with a plate and do 30 seconds at a time and check it. And then that's it. It's almost like a poached egg. And it's easy cleanup. I can't express how easy it is. And knowing that you've edited an egg cookbook.
Literally, I feel like you've just said, I discovered this thing. It's called a microwave.
No,
because
how many people cook microwave? How many people cook eggs in the microwave?
That's exactly how it started. At the beginning, it was eggs and potatoes, all the time.
What?
Constantly. Yes.
No.
We're coming back around. It's full circle.
Yes.
People think that I'm crazy for doing it.
No, when my kids were little, I would always do them in the microwave.
That's because you're old.
Yeah, it is. So yeah. But
no, I love that.
I love that you discovered this incredible thing, eggs in the microwave.
Let him have it.
I'm going to give it to him.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's actually a Korean recipe that's in my book. A lot of Korean moms will microwave eggs with scallions and jalapeno and put sesame oil on top. So that's that could be a variation.
In 2 weeks, you're going to come back and say you made a mug cake.
I support those.
Which I also heard you talking about on a podcast.
I love a mug cake. A good mug cake.
Yeah.
It's so easy, especially for wine.
Yeah.
We're going to change the name of this podcast to Gaze Eating.
We really are, because we talk about it a lot.
Both names are amazing. I'm like, this is the best podcast name ever. I will not be on a better titled podcast. Let's say that.
That's going to be a new pull quote. So
that's exactly well.
We could eat snacks while reading Real Americans.
You really could.
Oh, you should do like a snack, like a playlist, but snacks. Like
I think a lot of people wouldn't like the chewing
whilst reading.
Whilst reading. I think a lot of people don't like that. Yeah, I think
that's fair.
Maybe,
That's fair. Okay. All right. We're workshopping. We're figuring it out.
Exactly. By the end of this, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's how this goes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Rachel, can you give us your elevator pitch for Real Americans?
Oh, I'm so bad at this.
That's okay. Everyone's bad at it.
I'm so bad at it.
But for today, it could be as long of an elevator ride as you need it to be.
I think Real Americans is a story about a family. It covers 3 generations in a American family, and it's really a book that asks the question, how do we become who we become? That's my pitch.
That's excellent.
Lovely. Yeah.
That's excellent.
So you said it spans 3 generations, and what's so fun as a reader, while the whole book is cohesive, I would argue that there are nuggets of romance in the first section, nuggets of a coming of age story in the second section, and nuggets of historical fiction in the third section. So it's really like this book for anyone.
Yeah, and that was totally intentional. I think I love books that you can't quite put your finger on them. They're a mix of genres maybe. And I think you mentioned the second book being the coming of age story. I think all 3 of them are actually, because I think that I didn't really set out to do that, but in the end, that's what it turned out to be, because I think being someone maybe in your teens or your early 20s, that's such a formative age for so many of us. Maybe we're not fully developed quite yet. And I think this book, because it's so much about like how we become who we become, that period of life is especially important. I think not that we're done changing like at the moment right now, right? We're always changing, but I think there's just so much change that happens in that time. In that time. Yeah.
In general, the book, I think, touches so much on the concept of time and like feeling like time isn't moving and how change actually occurs and how like you're not the same person on the first date as you are on the day that you get proposed to.
Yeah.
Or are you? Right? Do you become, or is it an unfurling? Do you remember that person that you were when you like first started the book?
This is such a wonderful question because as you were talking, I was thinking about how time is so threaded into the book itself, because the book itself took years to write, and it was this daily process, right? I came to the book every day a slightly different person, and I knew when I started it that at the moment that I started it, I could not have finished it. I had to grow into the person who could finish the book, and I had to learn things along the way. I had to learn skills that I didn't have.
Like what?
In terms of writing skills. I don't know. At the beginning, I felt like I was so bad at dialogue, or at least that was what I was telling myself. And I think through writing this book, really taught myself what dialogue needed to be there, how to have sort of natural feeling dialogue. As a writer, you're always trying to hide the things that you're not as good at and put into the foreground the things that you are. But I think with this book, I really challenged myself to, just take a stab at things that I didn't feel necessarily like good at, in quotes, and just like really do my best. So I think I'm such a different person from the person that I was when I started the book. And it's hard to say exactly how, because it's hard to articulate your own changes because you're living through them, right? Maybe somebody else in your life might be able to speak to that better than you can.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, I feel like I'm like moving in the direction that I am supposed to be going in, but I couldn't tell you exactly the ways in which I've changed. Yeah. How do you guys feel? Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, correct me if I'm wrong, but you wrote these stories chronologically, correct?
I did, yeah. And
so that's an interesting thing too, because you're changing as you're going through, and then you're shifting a narrative so much with a wholly different person. And what was that like?
I think the thing is with the book, it wasn't like I did write it chronologically, as you said, not chronological, just like in the order of the characters' appearances. So I wrote it in that order. The characters came to me in that order, but I was constantly revisiting each character. So it wasn't like I wrote Lily's section first and then wrote May's section at the end.
And then never thought about them again.
Yeah, exactly. I never thought about them again. I was always like going back to them, always like bringing in, layering in things that I was learning.
How one started to inform the other.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, the middle, just what happened to the characters, each character was such a mess. I knew who they were. I knew their voices really well, but how they related to one another, what they were going through, what needed to be in the book itself. I think all of that just unfolded over this really long process. And it was almost like getting to know people, right? It feels, I don't know, just like mystical to say that, but I do think that for me, there's this process of learning who the characters are and learn who they are in the way that I would learn who people are, like just being in relationships with other people. And so they came to me slowly, and sometimes they would surprise me, and I would think, okay, is this a surprise that's true for them, or just a surprise that's out of left field and shouldn't happen? I don't know. There's all these.
You're still the boss.
Yeah, I'm still the boss. There's so many scenes that I wrote that had to happen for the characters, but then don't have to happen for the reader. They're just in a binder somewhere.
Talking about you wrote things that you needed to write for the characters, but not necessarily the reader.
Yeah.
Tying it into generally what the book is about, which for me was really about fortune and chance and these things that you articulating things that needed to happen for the character. Those are those things for me. It's, these are those chance moments. Do you have any examples in your real life that you could point to that are just magical?
Of things that happened to me?
Like a chance moment.
Oh my gosh. That's such a good question. I don't know. With this book, I was really thinking about, I have this feeling, and I suspect other people have this feeling too, that your life has gone the way that it was supposed to go, that things feel fated. I often think, because I'm an immigrant and my family came from Malaysia when I was 2 years old, I'm often thinking about this question of who would I be if we hadn't come to America? Who would I be if I still lived in Malaysia? Would I even be a writer? Would I care about writing? What would I care about instead? And I think a lot of us have these moments in our lives where like a decision is made, a direction is gone in or whatever, and you can't go back from it, right? Like your life is going to turn out the way that it turns out because of that decision. And I think there's so many more examples of that question. Oh, what if I hadn't married this person? What if I had married somebody else? What if I had moved here instead of somewhere else? There's just these like moments in our lives that really determine our lives, because we're all just individual human beings who have one life to live, really. And I think there's something sad about that as you grow older. Oh, okay, these doors have closed behind me. So it's really, I don't know. I think about that question all the time. Is this the way my life is supposed to go? And I think overwhelmingly, I think, like things feel fated, and things think, it's amazing that we're all here. Like it's such a maybe cliched thought or banal thought at this point, but it is like a little bit of a miracle.
Yeah. The opening number of Matilda the musical is called Miracle. And it's literally the idea that it's a miracle that we're born. It's a miracle that of all of the combinations of things, we are the people that we are.
When you look at the statistics, it's that's nuts.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And the fact that we're all talking is also just like a weird
and how one come together. All the
Exactly.
links that everybody has.
Yeah.
Whenever someone talks about like fate or chance or fortune and waves it off as like a lucky coincidence, I often share an anecdote that I'll share as succinctly as I can for our listeners. I was living in Chicago. I was visiting New York with my sister. We were staying in a hotel. We went from the hotel to then stay at my cousin's house in a different part of town. Instead of taking the subway or a cab, we were cheap and we walked the 45 minutes with our suitcases instead. On the walk, I clocked where a theater was that I had always wanted to see a show. There was a show that was playing. We stopped in to see if they have student rush tickets. They do. We go see the show that night. At intermission, a woman behind me, I overhear her say, "And I can't believe he did that thing to him." And I was like, what was that thing? And the person sitting next to me and I looked at each other and we both wanted to know what was that thing. He and I started talking. And then At the end of the night, he said, by the way, thanks for coming to see my show. And he was the composer. 6 months later, I didn't want to go out drinking on a Monday night. My friend was like, please, let's go. Our friend is moving out of town. Let's just go. I went. I opened the door to a bar in Chicago, and the first person I see is that composer. We reconnect. We exchange email addresses. 6 months later, he's emailing me and says, hey, I know you've graduated. You're planning on moving to New York. I'm working on the pre-Broadway workshop of that show. Would you be interested in moving sooner and working on it? And I did. And being there at that time is what got me my first job in New York and got me my full-time gig. Like, my whole life would have been totally different. I have to believe in these things, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Something else that's a big theme in the book is dreams. Themes in all of our books these days. The big question is, do you remember your dreams?
Oh, yes, I do. You know what? I've been like studying herbs a little bit this year. I've focused on one herb every month just to take as a tea or to. So one of those herbs was mugwort, which is an herb that you can drink it. It's pretty bitter, but I was taking baths in it. And it's also sometimes called dreamweed. And it gives you the most vivid dreams. Probably not everybody, but I think it has the capacity to. It has a capacity to. I think Native Americans used it for these like ritual dreaming purposes. And so I've been steeping in these mugwort baths and having these really vivid dreams. Some of them have to do with publication.
Those are the scary ones, right?
I know. I had a dream that was, I was having a yard sale in the dream, and it was my yard sale in theory, but as I was looking out on the lawn, I was noticing things that I didn't actually want to sell yet. There was like this cabinet that had my index cards in it. That was all my notes. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to sell that. And so I was like running out into the yard and bringing things back inside. And I realized that it was basically like after I had done some interviews and things, and I was that feeling of, oh, what did I say? Did I want to be selling that? Did I want to be putting that on the lawn? So that was one dream that it does feel book related. I would say so. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And it's also interesting thinking about the concept of fortune, but also the concept of dreams, because dreams are both things that happen to us in the nighttime that don't necessarily quote unquote mean anything. But then we have dreams like hopes and. Exactly. Do you guys remember your dreams? Rarely. I want to know about a recent dream. I rarely remember my dreams.
Yeah, I don't really much in it either. My daughter has incredibly vivid dreams and proceeds to tell me all about them every morning. But is that fun, or is it fun or no?
She's a teenager.
Yeah, she's 17. So they're usually involves being chased. There are a lot of nightmares.
Yeah.
My husband has a lot of nightmares too. Oh no. And he remembers them. That's so unpleasant. Yeah. Dream Scenario, another movie that's relevant here. Have you seen that?
No, what's that one?
It has Nicolas Cage in it, and he starts appearing in people's dreams.
You were pointing out some winners today.
Just not to mention that it's relevant to the teenage daughter telling you also about your dreams, about her dreams. She should probably watch that movie.
Unless it'll give her nightmares, and then it'll just be one more thing to add to the pot.
Yeah. Speaking of nightmares and just like dreams and things and trauma, a question in the book is wondering whether or not sadness is inherited. What do you think? Oh my goodness. I don't know. I mean, that's the question that I ask, but I don't know. Because I think in part, yes, I think there's so much that is inherited, and that's for better and for worse. It's just a mixed bag for most people. But I think it's you do still have agency over your own life, right? And I think to a degree, it's that nature versus nurture question, right? Sure.
Yeah.
So maybe it's inherited, but you can also do something. Yeah. But I also think I do feel like it definitely is inherited, and some people have it harder than other people. I think that's absolutely true in so many arenas, so many facets of life, really. It's like some people have it harder than other people. Some people find things easier than other people do. And
we also dialogue about it differently now, though, too, because that was one of the things as an older folk that resonated with me so much, especially with the mother in the story, because we talked earlier about the choices you make and what does that mean, but it's also so much about parents and the choices there in this book that recurs so much about the choices we're making because either we think that's in the best interest for our child or whatnot, and the impacts that has in the long terms. But I do think about that with dialoguing about something that I found out later in life, like very recently, is that my father really struggled with depression. I never knew that growing up. Certainly I knew that within my own family structure, and I see it in my child, there is anxiety that exists. Growing up, we didn't have words for that. You just dealt with it. You were told, go outside and play. And that's the way it was handled. Where now we have words for what these things are. We're dialoguing about it. The first time that I went to a therapist when I came out of college, I remember my father saying to me, why are you doing that? You talk to your friends. That's what your friends are for. And I was like, and I had to explain to him, it's a different thing. It's someone that's removed. But they couldn't get that concept. So it's also just such an interesting thing with your book, and also just in the relationship between Lily and her mother, and then Lily and Nick as well, and how all those things inform each other.
Yeah, I love so much of what you just brought up. I think this book is so much about the limits of our own perspectives. Our perspectives are so shaped by our upbringing, our culture. We have these very limited perspectives. And I think even in relationships with people we really love and we're really striving to understand, there are these huge gaps in our knowledge of them, right? You didn't know what you eventually found out about your father. You didn't know what he went through. And I'm sure that's years of his life, right? That you just weren't privy to. And I think that's something that's always been really interesting to me, is especially between parents and children, there are these huge gaps in knowledge, right? I don't remember my life before a certain point. My memory starts at a certain point, and my parents know so much more about me as a child than I know about me as a child. But I also don't know anything about who my parents used to be, who they were when they were my age. And I can ask them about it, but the story it's something, but it's not quite enough, right? I'm never going to live the experience alongside them. And I think that's a little bit sad, because these are people we love deeply in many cases and would like to understand more deeply. But I think there's always a limit to how much we can understand our loved ones. And I think for parents and their children, parents are often trying to make the best decision that they can for their children, but they have limited knowledge, right? You can only do the best you can and make some rules for your kid that you think are beneficial to them. For example, Lily doesn't allow Nick to have screens really in his life. She doesn't allow him to have a smartphone or the internet because she's worried it's going to harm him.
In every sense.
In every sense. And the moment that he is not under her thumb anymore, I'm 100% going to get on Instagram or whatever. There's a limit to what we can understand about each other. And I think it's just something that's always really interested me. And it's a little heartbreaking, I think.
And what gets passed down generation to generation, whether you are conscious of it or not, the things that you inherit and in some ways too, the repetition that starts to happen too from generation to generation and how that's handled.
Yeah. And I think if you don't talk about it, obviously then you're doomed to repeat these past, maybe you can call them mistakes, but just you're doomed to repeat the past if you don't talk about it. Exactly. That's also true of history at large as well. Yeah.
As we're looming on November.
Yeah. And talking about a parent doing the best they can, making the choices that they can, I can't help but wonder, what choices are we actually making for ourselves? Because society is imposing so much on us, whether it's assimilating or marketing or what we are supposed to believe. How individual are we actually being?
Yeah, that's something that I was thinking about throughout writing this novel. It's so much about, marketing, but also just the propaganda of this particular country that we live in. Which I think I wanted to write about China and America because these are two nations that have a lot of just narrative surrounding them. And I think we think of China and we think propaganda, obviously. But in America, there's so much propaganda, right? And there's a sort of narrative that's pushed about what does it mean to be a real American, right? Yeah. An American, a person who is a productive member of society. What does it mean to be a valuable member of society? I think we pay there's a lot of lip service to diversity in this country, but the way it shakes out in our in our reality, I think we still have a long ways to go, right? I don't think that for the most part, everyone is so cool with diversity or cool with people being like differently abled of whatever sexual orientation they want. There's still so much pressure to conform. And I think we see that especially like in social media. And I think that's something that feels like worrying to me, right? And so that's why I wanted to write about it. It's like, I feel like we're trending toward homogeneity, and that's not good.
In every facet. You watch how the nation, I used to think that's why I used to love to go to Europe, because every city that you went to had history, was steeped in history. The architecture was different. The places were different. Here, everything, like I remember first coming to LA and it was just sprawl. It was like a mini mall that was spreading out forever. And yet I'd go back to my parents in Pittsburgh and it was becoming the same thing. Everything was becoming, everywhere had a Gap, everywhere had a Banana Republic, everywhere had these restaurants. The things that made anything even remotely distinct in our country were being leveled. And everything was just about, everybody has a Barnes and Noble and everyone has this. So you don't really need to go anywhere, except if you want different weather.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. The writer Kyle Chayka has this book called Filter World, and it's about algorithms and how they've shaped the world. And he talks about this Airbnb aesthetic that you can essentially find everywhere now. It's a sort of like vaguely Scandinavian, minimally furnished, either Airbnb or coffee shop or whatever, right? Like you can go to any other country, just a far-flung place, and just still find the same kind of place with pine furniture that will serve you a cappuccino.
Yeah, and truly. There's a comfort to it. I think there's that's why chain restaurants are a thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You gravitate to what you know.
But I think the comfort, obviously it's good to be comfortable sometimes, but it's also really good to be uncomfortable, right?
Sure.
Because being around people who are different from you is often uncomfortable, but that's what we need to have different perspectives and to be open to different ways of living. And that's what I'm wondering about, like going to the future is like, are we really going to trend toward like comfort and ease and like frictionless existence? Or are we going to, I don't know, just have friction and grow from that friction? I think friction is like how you change.
An interesting way that you articulate a lot of this in describing someone who's American-born Chinese, they will, when they eat an apple, they'll rinse it and take a bite into it. And if you're not American-born Chinese, you will rinse it and slice it into pieces and see who wants a piece.
Yeah.
And there's something, I think that really sums everything that you're talking about. There is this selfishness, but there's also this scarcity idea. And it's open the door, invite the neighbor, like share with someone that you may not know, or it might not feel comfortable, but you can bond over this shared experience.
Right.
And that's a very different thing.
Yeah. I think there are things that both cultures can learn from each other. Right. And I think that in America, there is this myth of this idea that we all have pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, that nobody else is responsible for our success. Like we did it on our own. That was something that I was so raised with as a kid. And I think it's something that I'm consciously trying to unlearn because, I started writing this book during basically right after the election in 2016. And Brett, you just mentioned November, which is coming up. It's so strange, actually, that it's just circled back to this. And I'm talking about the book right now when I really started it because of that election. And I think, that elected president was like this example of somebody who really marketed himself as a person who had pulled himself up by his own bootstraps, who didn't owe anything to anybody, who was self-made. And it was so clear that was so far from the truth.
It's Oz.
Yeah. And he had like just had every possible advantage. And I think, the reality is that we're all in community. We're all in relationships with one another, and we're all responsible for one another and our lives, really. Like, so why do poor people exist in this country? Like, why are people unhoused? Like, we should be taking responsibility for those people and making sure that they're housed. And instead, there's this other priority, it seems like, of like people instead like racing to be billionaires. I think it's just the priorities are messed up. And it's also, this book is about like, I don't know, just questioning the sort of exaltation of a certain way of the self-made man, the individual, the powerful individual, right?
you have that whole clash in the beginning, because I said it's almost like, to me, I likened it to almost like the way we were with Hubble and Katie, where these two different worlds are coming together despite it. He's this kind of Redford-esque guy who's had everything literally handed to him.
Yeah.
And so there's this, how do these two worlds come together? How can these two people, and for all intents and purposes, he seems to be going after her. She said, what are you doing?
Exactly.
I don't even understand like how you would be interested in me. So it's a fascinating kind of turn on it, but it is exactly what you're talking about, of these two worlds coming, these two diametrically opposed worlds coming
and she's
together.
been raised to believe that this is like the ideal person, right? I mean, I think they connect on a deeper level too, but I think that, I think that there's this understanding that, oh, of course, people, we can all see why he is desirable, right? He has wealth, he has whiteness, all of these things. And it's the fact that that's comprehensible and understandable to people, like, oh yeah, this is what you want, this is attractive.
The ideal.
Yeah, I think that's something that I was pushing too. Like, why do we do that? Like, why is that the ideal? Can there be these other ideals?
Why is that ideal? Why are there unhoused people? There are a lot of these interesting questions. And one of the things that I clocked as just an interesting concept was the idea of abiding by rules when you understand their inherent purpose in the book. I have to wonder, do we need to do a better job in society at making sure people understand why the rules are important and why they're there to begin with? Or like why some of these, I say rules in quotation marks, but I think so many people would have an immediate response to supporting the unhoused.
Yeah.
Right? It's victim blaming or not willing to see the big picture. And it's okay, but there are these things that are in place that we're choosing to move forward or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's this like interesting, there's a privilege.
Yeah.
It's cast.
Yeah.
It's Isabel Wilkerson's whole, all of that. It's all of that kind of blown open.
And it's people saying, I don't need to follow these rules because they don't.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes too, because look, I could say living in Los Angeles, you are in a melting pot, right? You are constantly, it's like living in New York, any kind of large urban center. There's a large swath of the country that is only being centered in their whiteness, frankly. And so they have no sense of what else is there. And they're looking at immigrants as enemies, especially when it's being telegraphed to them. And so it's, how do you break those things down? And how do we, for lack of a better word, try to re-educate people to say, okay, these are the benefits, as opposed to this is the dire consequence, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a project of fiction, right? And a project of reading is to enter these other consciousnesses. And I think it's, people have become so cynical about that, right? The sort of capacity for reading to like change minds and lead to empathy. Like empathy is, I don't know, in some circles, it's like, can it really lead to this?
Yeah.
Doubt it. But I think that, I don't know, obviously I still believe in it, and that's why I do it, because I think if we aren't trying to understand one another, if we aren't trying to bridge these like really big divides in who, just in our perspectives, like how are we gonna, like coexist and understand? I think, like you were talking about, I was just thinking that so many people are so fearful of difference, of people who are different from them. And I think fear is totally understandable, because we live in these sort of overwhelming systems. We feel often like we don't have we feel both like we do and don't have choice in our life, right? Like we're at the mercy of these huge systems. And I think there's a lot of reasons to feel afraid right now. Like climate change is one of them, obviously, like impending wars. There's these powerful weapons. I don't know. There's a lot of scary things out there. And so I think it's human nature, right? To want to find your people, and probably your people look similar to you and have similar outlooks and perspectives. But I think, I do think like books are still like this opportunity to get outside of that a little bit. It's not, they're not the answer. You do have to like actually do the work and meet other people and be with real human beings. But I think they're just like one tool by which we can, feel empathy and feel maybe just more humble about our own experiences. Just like understanding. I think especially with this book, it's really so much about, it's like a case for humility, which is not very glamorous as like a subject for a book, but it's something that I'm just thinking about so much right now, because I think that we are getting very big for our britches, right? And like believing in our own centrality and our own, I don't know, like power.
The exceptionalism, the whole idea of American exceptionalism, which I think for many of us, I felt like that's been gone for a long time.
Yeah.
That when you look at where our education systems are, when you look at other countries in terms of how behind we are in so many different things, it's like people wake up a little bit and see what things actually are.
Yeah. And I think in that humility, that's where we can connect with one another.
Yeah.
That's where we can, understand and think maybe, okay, I don't know everything about you, but I would like to try to learn more about you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Something that I've never done before that I'm going to do right now is just looking at the time and being mindful of your time. There are a handful of questions that I didn't have a chance to talk about, but there's like much bigger picture things that I want to encourage our listeners to think about as they're reading. And we could maybe have a bigger picture conversation one day. But the book talks about real life versus a dream, real friends, or whether or not they are your people or your real friends, real time, real Americans. And I'm curious to our listeners, what does it mean to be real? What does real even mean? Putting that out into the universe.
Wow.
Something else.
Yeah.
Put your comments below.
Put your comments below.
That's
something
exactly
else
to ponder.
The impulse to keep information from someone else, to keep solely for yourself. Why do we do that? Question for our listeners. And finally, what if the way you love someone is different from how they want to be loved? What do we do?
I love those.
Big picture, big ether questions to ask to our listeners.
Those are your book club questions that go.
Those
in
are
the
the
book
club questions because honestly, the reality is I'm looking at the time and there's something so important that I want to talk to you about, and I'm just being selfish here.
Tell me.
There's an annual holiday themed movie.
Oh, yeah, yes,
While You Were Sleeping is one of them, and Die Hard is another one of them.
Yeah.
So While You Were Sleeping gets a shout out, and I love that movie. It's one of those movies that for me, I've seen the second half of.
Yes.
So much more than I've seen the first half of, because like when it's on TV, I stop and watch it.
I'm definitely into While We Were Sleeping. That's so funny. That's so funny. Because I was thinking about, I actually weirdly love mentioning the holidays in my fiction because I think it's so evocative as period of, I don't know, just like a season of the year. And I think especially in this book about America, like the holidays were always such this fraught time for me as this little immigrant kid, right? I grew up knowing that there was no Santa. I hope that's not a spoiler to anybody. Hopefully all your listeners. I grew up just knowing that there was no Santa and having to pretend with all my friends that there was a Santa. And it's just such an interesting time, especially for kids who have immigrant parents, right? What are you supposed to say to your friends? And so I think I'm always just drawn to that and drawn to any movies about the holidays too. I feel like a big sucker for. I love it. So,
but before we had streaming, remember they would schedule stuff that was particular time of year. Sound of Music was always around Easter.
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz, I think, was always, I don't know if it was Christmas, but it was always. So then you'd get all the like Rankin Bankin show, the Year Without a Santa Claus, Rudolph, all those stop motion things that we all loved with Herbie the Dentist. So you counted your seasons, Charlie Brown Christmas and Charlie Brown Halloween, and now all of that's gone. I remember when my kids were little, they'd be like, can't we just watch the video? And
it's April. We could watch Charlie Brown right now.
That's exactly right.
I'm going to watch A Muppet Christmas Carol as soon as we get off this Zoom.
That's right. Exactly right.
I love it. I think as a result of I'm like insisting on holiday movies around holiday time because I'm like, they're not going to do it for me. I need to watch It's a Wonderful Life right now.
If you're not under a blanket.
Yeah.
Back to herbs for a second. Okay. Are you familiar with kava?
I'm familiar. I haven't really used it. Okay. Yeah. Are you a kava person?
I ask because I live across the street from what's called Kava Collective.
Oh.
And I tried it for the first time last week. And I was like, what is this?
Is it like coffee?
Maybe it's like a cousin of coffee. It's not coffee. It's like a root that is steeped.
Have you tasted it?
And then flavored. Literally, the kava that I had was ube kava.
Oh my God. Full circle.
Coming back to the ube.
And do they sweeten it? Or do you sweeten it? Or is it sweetened in a cup?
No, and it was served cold and it like makes your tongue and your throat a little numb. But it's supposed to be really good for you and good for your inflammation and all of these things. But it's just so freaking weird. And as you were talking about your mugwort baths, I was like, maybe you also know kava.
How did it make you feel?
Very soporific.
That's good.
Yeah. It was weird
good vocabulary word.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was weird ingesting, but I appreciated the sort of zen feeling it gave you.
Mm-hmm. Did you do it socially, like with a friend, or you did it alone?
I was with a friend.
Yeah.
And it's this thing where it's across the street. I've never been in. I've lived in this apartment for 2 years. I'm so curious. And we went in and we had a whole experience.
Wow.
I picture the two of you talking afterwards with your tingly tongues and be like, oh, the interesting.
I was reading a book, actually. They have like couches. It's very zen.
Wow.
Okay. Lily listens to people while they're at restaurants. Do you do that?
Yes, 100%.
Me too. Do you ever insert yourself?
I don't insert myself, but I definitely judge. Like the other day I was at a cafe and there was a woman with her dog, and her dog would bark at every person, but she would pretend each time like it was the dog's first time. Like she'd be like, oh no, he never does that.
He did 4 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
No, I'll be like, oh, you're deciding between the burger and the scallops. I've been here before. I'm telling you, do this one. Like, I'll do that.
That's good. You should. Yeah.
That's what I think.
That's
okay.
benefit.
The last thing I wanted to share with you is you are our 50th episode.
Yeah.
Whoa.
We started this in June of last year. We had no idea that people would actually be interested in talking to us. And it's been overwhelming and so special and remarkable. And this is our 50th one. And so thank you.
We were thrilled that you are here for our 50th.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing. Yeah.
Very special. Congrats on the book.
Yes, it's
Thank
great.
you.
It's
Thank
great.
you.
It's really exciting.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Congratulations on 50. I was almost going to say 50 years, but 50 episodes. May you have 50 more years. May you have 50 more years, 100 more years. And thank you so much. This was so fun to touch.
Oh, I'm glad. Thanks, Rachel. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
Rachel, thank you so much for joining us on our 50th episode. Everybody, again, thank you. We're so grateful to our listeners and everybody who has been supporting us along this journey. And we can't wait for more.
We have great stuff coming up. So
great stuff coming up.
Stick around.
And have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.